Have you ever felt like something's deeply wrong with the world, but you can't quite explain what? Like no matter how much you accomplish, how many pleasures you chase, or how busy you stay, there's an invisible weight pressing on your soul, a silence that doesn't bring peace, but discomfort. It's as if your spirit is trying to whisper a truth you've been trained to ignore. Nothing makes sense anymore, and maybe it never did. There's a forgotten wisdom that echoes through the ages, a sacred paradox buried beneath layers of noise and illusion. It tells us that everything we chase might be meaningless, that even success, pleasure, and knowledge can become chains when they're disconnected from our essence. What if the feeling of emptiness you've been trying to escape isn't a flaw in you, but a signal from the universe guiding you back to yourself? Today, we're going to enter the most misunderstood and mystical message ever written. Not a religious sermon, but a psychological revelation. A key to unlocking why life can feel so heavy, so absurd, and how that very absurdity holds the seed of your awakening. We'll uncover why even your faith might feel hollow, why time slips through your fingers, why pleasure fades, and how all of this is part of your sacred invitation to return to the present moment, to embrace your soul, and to reconnect with the living pulse of the spiritual cosmos that moves through you. This video isn't just content, it's a mirror, and if you're courageous enough to look into it, you may finally understand why so many things that once mattered no longer do, but you'll also discover what does matter. And it's not what the world told you. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Are you one of the many who watch our videos, feel deeply moved but haven't subscribed yet? If this kind of content speaks to your soul, don't just watch, belong. Hit the subscribe button now and join the Celestial Truths community. This journey isn't meant to be walked alone. There's a peculiar kind of fatigue that slips into the soul, not the kind that sleep cures, but a deeper, quieter erosion of meaning. It visits in the middle of a routine day, in the subtle pause after a task is completed, or in the quiet moments before sleep. It doesn't scream, but it hums, a background frequency that suggests something is misaligned. Many wander through their lives haunted by this invisible dissonance, sensing that their outer accomplishments fail to match the rhythm of their inner truth. This isn't mere melancholy. It's a signal from the universe whispering that the soul is calling for a different kind of nourishment, one that the world of form cannot provide. This existential tiredness often shows itself in symptoms we tend to dismiss: restlessness, lack of motivation, a yearning for something we can't name. Like a shadow lurking just out of view, it pushes us to search, to question, to break free from the script we've unconsciously followed. In Jungian terms, this is the beginning of individuation, the sacred unrest that precedes awakening. The self, hidden beneath layers of social persona, begins to stir. And when it does, it disturbs the surface of our lives, reminding us that spirituality isn't always found in light. It sometimes rises from the cracks where we've broken open. Imagine a traveler walking through a familiar forest, but suddenly sensing the trees whispering differently. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has. The paths feel hollow, the landmarks foreign. This is what it feels like when the soul begins to resist, living a life that no longer reflects its essence. It's as if the mystical realm begins to bleed through the veil of the ordinary. Dreams become strange and symbolic. Synchronicities increase, and silence becomes louder than any noise. The universe starts to communicate through metaphor, and the more we ignore it, the more intense the messages become. For some, this silence within feels like abandonment, like the divine has turned its face away. But for those who dare to listen, it becomes a sacred invitation. Practices like dream journaling, contemplative walks, or even quiet reflection with a candle can become rituals of reconnection. These are not distractions, but portals, ways to step back into rhythm with the cosmos. We are not meant to merely function. We are meant to resonate. And that resonance can only return when we stop silencing the voice within. So, if you've ever found yourself staring out a window, heart aching without a clear reason, know that you're not broken, you're awakening. That internal ache is not weakness, but a doorway into your spiritual depth, your symbolic language, your soul's memory. The weariness you feel is the weight of all that is unlived within you, asking, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully, to be remembered. And once you begin listening, the path unfolds. Not all at once, but layer by layer, and that's where we go next. There comes a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes shattering, when a person reaches the summit of their desires only to find it echoing with emptiness. It's a strange paradox, to possess everything the world glorifies, wisdom, wealth, status, pleasure, and yet feel a hollow ache gnawing beneath it all. This is the moment when the soul begins to whisper truths that the ego cannot bear. The illusion has been broken. What once glittered now reveals itself as vapor, transient, like smoke escaping the fingers. In the symbolic language of the universe, this is the unraveling of the false self, the beginning of the soul's return to essence. The concept of vanity here isn't about pride, it's about impermanence. Everything external that we chase, hoping it will ground our identity, eventually slips away. The car loses its shine, the applause fades, the knowledge becomes outdated. Even pleasure, when pursued compulsively, becomes sterile. And this is no accident. The mystical laws that govern existence are crafted not to satisfy the ego's hunger, but to awaken the seeker. The moment we realize that nothing out there can define us is the moment the inward journey begins. A journey not of addition, but of subtraction, of peeling away illusion to find the soul beneath the noise. In Jungian thought, this awakening often follows a deep encounter with the shadow, the confrontation with everything we've suppressed, avoided, or projected onto others. Success without soul is often the mask worn by the fragmented self. We see this pattern in countless lives, individuals who have it all yet spiral into crisis. Why? Because they built a kingdom around their persona, not their essence. The spirituality of collapse, the dark night of the soul, emerges here as a gift disguised as ruin. The unraveling of identity isn't the end, it's the rite of passage into authenticity. This theme echoes in the lives of artists, visionaries, and even mystics. The realization that truth doesn't dwell in possession, but in presence. When one stops chasing meaning and starts embodying it, the shift is profound. Suddenly the simple becomes sacred, a shared meal, a sincere conversation, the quiet of dawn. These become altars where the universe speaks, where the soul breathes. No longer enslaved by the need to impress or dominate, the individual begins to be. And in that being, something eternal flickers behind the eyes. So if you've ever reached a goal and felt strangely untouched by it, you're not alone. You're being initiated into a deeper layer of reality. You're starting to see that the ladder so many climb leads to a wall made of mirrors, and behind those mirrors is your true face, waiting. Not the face the world taught you to wear, but the one that remembers stars, dreams, and truths that no language can hold. And so the search changes, from having to being, from the surface to the soul, and the next question quietly rises. If pleasure can't fill the void, what are we really searching for? In a world brimming with dopamine traps and endless distractions, pleasure has become less a celebration of life and more an escape from it. Like a treadmill that never stops, we chase the next thrill, the next like, the next binge, the next purchase, believing that satisfaction is just around the corner. But the more we indulge, the less fulfilled we feel. This is the paradox of the hedonistic loop. It offers stimulation, but starves the soul. And though our senses are flooded, our spirits remain parched. The universe, wise in its mysteries, allows this hunger to grow, not to punish but to redirect. Pleasure, when disconnected from depth, becomes a numbing agent, a sedative against the ache of meaninglessness. We scroll for hours not because we're interested, but because silence terrifies us. We consume because stillness feels unbearable, but the silence we avoid is sacred. It is the voice of the self, the signal that something deeper longs to awaken. The mystical path does not deny pleasure, it reclaims it. It teaches that true enjoyment arises not from excess, but from presence. A single sip of tea, fully savored, contains more soul than a night of empty indulgence. Carl Jung once noted that modern people cannot hear the voice of God because they are never quiet. This spiritual deafness is the curse of our age. We confuse stimulation with aliveness, but there is a vast difference between being entertained and being engaged with existence. One distracts us from our wounds. The other invites us to heal. We've become addicted to the high of immediacy, while neglecting the sacred tension of waiting, yearning, and becoming. True spirituality demands space. It requires that we sit with discomfort long enough for wisdom to emerge. To break free from the hedonistic cycle, one must begin to observe themselves not as a consumer of moments, but as a witness of them. Start small. Turn off your notifications. Light a candle. Journal the dreams that made no sense last night. Ask yourself not what you want, but what you need to feel whole. Notice the patterns. How often pleasure is pursued in moments of loneliness, fear, or boredom. That awareness alone can shift the rhythm. Slowly, what once numbed begins to reveal its emptiness, and from that space something authentic begins to grow. So if you feel exhausted after chasing what was supposed to satisfy you, perhaps that fatigue is a gift, a divine frustration, a sign that your soul is no longer willing to settle for artificial light when it remembers the stars. The universe has encoded your longing with purpose, not to torment you, but to draw you inward, toward a pleasure that doesn't fade, toward a joy that isn't bought, toward a presence that doesn't flee when the moment ends. And this presence is where we go next. Faith, for many, has been packaged as a promise of certainty, a warm blanket for the soul in a cold, unpredictable world. But the deeper one walks into the forest of inner truth, the more one realizes true faith is not comfort. It is confrontation. It is the courage to keep walking even when the path vanishes beneath your feet. The seeker learns, often through pain, that the universe doesn't always answer in words, but in silence. And that silence is not absence but initiation. To have faith, then, is not to know. It is to trust what cannot yet be known. There's a sacred anguish in this kind of belief. The mystical traditions have always whispered this secret. The divine does not rush to console, it waits in the space where the ego dies. And that space feels like abandonment at first, a dark night, a void. Jung understood this as the confrontation with the self, the place where our constructed images of God, life, and self begin to dissolve. In this dissolution, something far more real begins to emerge. Not the God of doctrines or dogmas, but the living pulse of the soul, connected to the deeper fabric of spirituality that underlies all things. This faith, raw, vulnerable, undomesticated, is not something you inherit. It is forged in fire, in unanswered prayers, in dreams that crumble, in the moments when the ground disappears and all that remains is a whisper within. Keep going. It's the quiet decision to rise after collapse, to stay open while bleeding, to search for meaning even in absurdity. And that search, though painful, is holy. It is the alchemical process that turns despair into depth, that makes the wounded heart a vessel for something far greater than itself. There is a story told not in scripture but in silence, of those who waited, hoped, and loved in the dark. They are not saints in golden frames. They are people like you, who doubted everything and still chose to remain, who didn't find peace in faith, but found faith in the lack of peace. This is the paradox the universe teaches again and again, that strength is not the absence of fear, but the intimacy with it. That belief is not born in answers, but in the ache of the unanswered. So if you find yourself questioning, doubting, even feeling abandoned by life or by the divine, know this: you are not falling off the path. You are being called into its deeper layers. The silence is not rejection, it's refinement, a stripping away of illusions. And what remains when everything else dissolves is a trust that can hold mystery without needing to solve it. That's the kind of faith that reshapes the soul. And from that soul space, we now begin to face the great illusion of control. We live under the spell of calendars, clocks, and plans, believing that by organizing time we master it. But time, like the wind, doesn't ask for our permission. It moves in rhythms older than language, flowing through us, not because we control it, but because we are part of its dance. The more we try to dominate it, the more we feel dominated by it. And here, the universe smiles gently, revealing a deeper truth. Control is a comforting illusion, but surrender is the true gateway to freedom. In dreams, time bends. In love, it vanishes. In trauma, it stretches infinitely. These anomalies reveal a secret. Time is not linear, it is symbolic. The soul doesn't experience minutes or hours. It experiences cycles, thresholds, initiations. That's why, no matter how meticulously we plan, life still arrives unexpectedly. A sudden loss, an unplanned encounter, a shift in purpose. We are reminded, again and again, that we are not the masters of time, but its students. And the mystical path teaches us to read these temporal disruptions not as failures, but as invitations to align with a rhythm far more sacred than our agendas. Jung spoke of kairos, the opportune moment, the right time as dictated by the psyche, not the clock. In this framework, time is not quantity but quality. A second of revelation can outweigh years of routine. A single moment of presence can realign an entire life. When we obsess over schedules and timelines, we may miss the soul's timing, the dream that arrives at dawn, the intuitive nudge during silence, the synchronicity that interrupts a routine. These are the signs through which the universe orchestrates our becoming, and to ignore them is to lose the thread of the real story unfolding beneath the surface. Let go then of the need to have it all figured out by a certain age, in a certain order, by a certain standard. Those metrics were never designed for the soul. Real growth happens outside of deadlines. Real transformation doesn't follow quarterly. Reports. The river of life takes unexpected turns, and sometimes what feels like delay is divine incubation. You are not late. You are ripening. Trust that. Begin to mark time not by productivity, but by presence. Celebrate not just what you've achieved, but what you've survived, what you've learned, how deeply you've felt. So the next time life pulls you in a direction you didn't plan, pause. Listen. Something ancient is guiding you. Maybe it's not about being on time, but being in tune. The illusion of control will fall again and again, but in its place grows something real, the ability to dance with life, not against it. And in that dance we begin to see, perhaps even success itself carries the scent of illusion. In the theatre of modern life, success has become the ultimate performance, polished, curated, celebrated. Yet beneath the applause and achievements, many feel a strange emptiness. They've reached the summit only to realize the mountain was made of smoke. The validation fades. The numbers grow meaningless. The congratulations echo hollow in a soul that never truly felt seen. This is the silent crisis of those who win according to the world's rules, but lose themselves in the process. The universe, however, is never impressed by surface. It calls us back to substance. What is success if it's fueled by comparison, if it's born not from purpose, but from the fear of being less? We've created a culture where every triumph must be shared, monetized, turned into a brand. And in doing so, we've emptied meaning of its mystery. The mystical soul, on the other hand, doesn't crave status. It craves wholeness. It asks, am I aligned with my essence? Am I living a life that feels real to me? These questions are not glamorous, but they are sacred. They are the quiet doorway to spirituality in a world that worships visibility. Jung warned of the danger of inflation, the psychological state where the ego identifies with its persona, mistaking the mask for the self. This is what often happens with success. The achievements become armor, the titles distractions, and the soul. It whispers from behind the scenes, growing restless, because true fulfillment doesn't come from applause, but from resonance. When your actions reflect your truth, when your days reflect your depth, there's a peace no trophy can match. The universe knows when you're living from your center and when you're just performing. If you've ever felt that strange dissonance after accomplishing something, a quiet voice asking, and now what? You've touched the edge of this illusion. That voice isn't ungrateful. It's awakening. It's calling you to a different kind of success. One measured not by accumulation, but by authenticity. One where the inner world is rich even if the outer world is silent. Where meaning flows not from what you do, but from who you become in the doing. That is the beginning of sacred work. And so perhaps success is not something to pursue, but to redefine. Not a destination, but a mirror. If everything can be vanity, then let us ask, what would it mean to succeed in a way that makes your soul exhale with relief? To build not empires, but sanctuaries. To be seen not by many, but truly by yourself. These questions open the next threshold, learning to find the sacred not in what's next, but in what is. After peeling away illusions of success, control, and pleasure, something quietly profound begins to emerge, the present moment. so easily. Overlooked, yet holding the depth of eternity. It asks for no performance, no perfection, only presence. And in this stillness, the universe speaks not through thunder, but through the sacred ordinary, a breath, a glance, a meal shared without rush. When the seeker stops chasing meaning out there, they begin to feel the soul vibrating here and now. The now is not just a moment, it is a portal. In a world obsessed with becoming, we forget the holiness of being. But the ancient mystics always knew. This moment, when touched with attention, reveals dimensions far beyond time. The mystical is not a distant realm, it is here, shimmering behind the mundane. Washing dishes becomes a meditation. Listening becomes a healing act. Silence becomes symphonic. And this awareness, this returning to what is, marks the reawakening of the self. It is here that spirituality stops being theory and becomes embodiment. Jung often spoke of the integration of opposites, the merging of inner and outer, light and shadow. This union happens only in the now. The past is memory, the future, imagination. But now is alive. And it is only in this living moment that we can truly see ourselves without distortion, see others without judgment, see the world not as a battlefield of desires, but as a sacred stage where the soul expresses itself. In this sacred time, life stops being something to endure and becomes something to behold. Try this. Pause in the middle of your day. Close your eyes. Feel the air touching your skin. Notice the texture of your breath. Hear the subtle sounds around you. What you're sensing is not trivial, it is divine. These moments are not detours from your life's path. They are the path. And the more we attune to them, the more synchronicities begin to unfold. It's as if the universe, sensing your presence, begins to conspire gently in your favor, not with grand gestures, but with delicate alignments. So if everything else is vanity, perhaps this moment is the treasure. Unmarketable, unrepeatable, undeniable. The now cannot be owned, it can only be entered. And when we live from this space, something inside us softens. The need to prove fades. The urge to chase dissolves. We return home, not to a place, but to a presence. And in that presence we rediscover the joy of simply being, a joy that prepares us for the final dance, the acceptance of life's ephemeral beauty. If all is vanity, then let it be a conscious vanity, an elegant surrender to the transience of existence. Life may be fleeting, but when lived with presence it becomes a sacred dance, not a performance to be perfected, but a ritual to be felt. The petals fall, the stars burn out, our bodies change, but within it all there's a strange and beautiful truth. It is the very impermanence that makes life holy. The universe does not promise permanence, it offers presence. And when we accept this, we stop clinging and start dancing. To embrace the ephemeral is to love without needing to possess, to give without calculating return, to wake each day not as a conquest but as a ceremony. This is not passivity, it's profound courage, the courage to say, yes, I will love, even if it ends. Yes, I will try, even if I fail. Yes, I will live, even if I break. The mystical soul knows that it is precisely in the absurdity of life that meaning is born. We do not need eternity to be eternal. We need only one moment of true connection, one breath taken with reverence, one step in rhythm with our essence. Carl Jung called this amor fati, the love of one's fate, to not just endure life, but to embrace it. Every twist, every shadow, every absurd detail. This isn't about resignation, it's about transformation. It's about becoming the kind of being who finds poetry in pain and sacredness in sorrow, the kind of being who, even while falling, learns how to fly within. In this way, spirituality is no longer something we reach for. It becomes the very ground we walk on, no matter how uneven the path. And so life becomes not a puzzle to solve, but a mystery to live. Not a problem to escape, but a paradox to honor. We are not here to be perfect, or to win, or to last forever. We are here to feel deeply, love freely, and dance fully. The meaning of life may never be spelled out in words, but it's etched into the very fabric of our presence. And when we give ourselves to the dance, even if only for a moment, that moment becomes infinite. So as the light fades and another chapter ends, the seeker smiles, not because they found every answer, but because they finally learned how to ask the right questions. They learned that the universe responds not to certainty, but to sincerity, not to control, but to communion. And now, the path continues. Not in the future, not in the past, but in this sacred breath, here, now. So now I ask you, have you ever felt like everything you chased turned to dust the moment you touched it? What part of your life feels like vanity, and what feels sacred? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your truth. If this video stirred something deep inside you, don't forget to like, subscribe to Celestial Truths, and turn on the notifications. That's how you make sure the next message finds you exactly when your soul needs it most. And speaking of that, the next video on your screen might hold the next key in your journey. Don't ignore the sign, click it, and continue awakening. With reverence and light, Celestial Truths.